A Brief but Not So Brief History of Vaccines by Joseph Dougherty. Have you ever thought about what a vaccine actually is? Oxford Languages defines it as a substance used to stimulate immunity to a particular infectious disease or pathogen, typically prepared from an inactivated or weakened form of the causative agent or from its constituents or products. And while this is a great definition, it doesn't get at some important details. Hopefully today I can teach you a few things about the history of vaccines, what they are, where they come from, and where they're going. The first vaccine. To begin our discussion, we need to travel back to the late 1700s. Imagine putting yourself there in a time when getting any common cold was a lot bigger of a deal than it is now. During this time, the disease smallpox ran rampant across parts of the world, and particularly Europe. Smallpox is a disease caused by the variola virus, and estimates put the lethality rate at around 50% for adults and upwards of 80% for children. However, after a person gets it, they are given lifelong immunity. However, with so few survivors, smallpox served as a scourge from which no end seemed in sight. Interestingly, a glimmer of hope came from the most uncanny of places. One day, a man by the name of Edward Jenner noticed that milkmaids appeared to not get smallpox, or if they did, it was far less severe than the normal case. He ultimately hypothesized that they were getting a form of smallpox, or cowpox, from the cows that they were milking, and that somehow this milder form of the disease instilled immunity in them without subjecting them to full-blown smallpox. From this hypothesis, Edward Jenner went on to test his hypothesis on the son of his gardener, which has obvious ethical questions, but he found positive results. Without fully understanding the underlying principles, Edward Jenner actually birthed the world's first vaccine. From his preliminary experiments, people went on to begin intentionally transmitting cowpox. A practitioner could take the pockmarks from a person infected with cowpox and use them to induce a mild case of cowpox in another individual and confer smallpox immunity. With this, smallpox was the first, but it was definitely not the last. Chapter 2: How the Immune System Works. Two sides to it. On one hand is our innate immune system, which serves as our body's first line of defense. It takes a non-specific, generalized approach to dealing with and destroying foreign pathogens. When it is not enough, our adaptive immune system comes in and takes a specific approach to target and destroy the pathogens. After initial exposure, our innate immune system upticks to combat the foreign body. Should its response be insufficient, the viral load will build, and this is when you feel sick. After this period of time, our immune system has usually had enough time to recognize the invader and formulate a response. Our adaptive immune system then begins to kick in and will lower the viral load. When thinking about the immune system, I think it is common to only think that there are white blood cells. In actuality, there is a whole slew of types of cells. Originating in our bone marrow as stem cells, these stem cells will differentiate into all the components that make up our immune system and its beautiful complexity. In our innate immune system, we have macrophages, with one of their primary roles being to engulf foreign invader and debris. We have neutrophils, which are the most abundant type of white blood cell. They typically surround and engulf foreign pathogens. We have dendritic cells, which mainly serve as a bridge between the innate and adaptive immune systems. They send antigens of the foreign pathogen to the adaptive immune system to create a specialized immune response. We have eosinophils, which are specialized to help defend the body from parasites. And lastly, we have basophils, which are cells that play a role in the release of histamines, heparins, and enzymes. In our adaptive immune system, we have B cells, which their primary job is to produce antibodies. And we also have T cells, capable of recognizing and destroying pathogens and infected cells. And in the overlap between our innate and adaptive, we have natural killer T cells, which can mount a rapid immune response and play and display characteristics of both the innate and adaptive immune system. Chapter 3: Vaccine Platforms. There is not a one-shoe-fits-all formula for vaccine creation. When talking about vaccines, to group them into different types of vaccines, you come across this term of a vaccine platform. This just refers to different types of vaccines. Listed here are some of the common platforms. Firstly is inactivated virus vaccines, which is where a virus is cultured and subjected to a process that renders it non-infectious. There's live attenuated virus vaccines, which is where a virus is still alive but has been weakened in order to decrease any risk of infection. There are recombinant protein vaccines, which utilize genetically engineered proteins to elicit an immune response. There's bacterial vector vaccines, which uses an attenuated bacteria to express and present antigens to prime the immune system for a pathogen. There are synthetic peptide vaccines, which are designed proteins meant to represent specific epitopes or antigenic regions of a pathogen. There are RNA-based vector vaccines, which deliver RNA into the body to allow the immune system to express antigens and antibodies for a specific pathogen. And similar to RNA vaccines are DNA-based vector vaccines, which instead of using RNA, they deliver DNA as the genetic material to elicit the same response. There are also viral vector vaccines, which is a vaccine that utilizes a viral vector to deliver genetic material that can be transcribed by the host to code for desired proteins or antigens. And lastly are virus-like particles, which are structures that resemble viruses but lack genetic material, so they are not infectious, but they simulate viruses on the outside in order to stimulate an immune response. Chapter 4: Clinical Trials. There is a complex system of checks and balances in place in order to release a new vaccine to the public. Today, vaccines go through what are called clinical trials. At first, there's an exploratory screening process where methods are tested and evidence is gathered in order to make a case for a vaccine to be tested on people. If a method is promising enough, Phase 1 of trials will begin with a very small portion of healthy volunteers, think like 20 to 100 people. The primary objectives are to evaluate the treatment's safety, identify side effects, and determine appropriate dosages. Should this phase yield promising results, Phase 2 will be begun. This phase includes a larger number of people, upwards of several hundred. The primary focus is on determining the treatment's effectiveness, monitoring side effects, and further refining dosage. Should Phase 2 succeed, Phase 3 will begin. This phase enrolls even more people, think several thousand. The goal is to confirm the treatment's effectiveness, monitor side effects on a larger scale, and compare the new treatment with existing treatments. If the product passes all these tests, then it can move on to FDA approval and release to the public. Chapter 5: Future of Vaccines. Amazing new advances in immunoengineering are on the horizon, with vaccines for things such as cancer, allergies, and autoimmune diseases already coming into existence. Treatments for cancer include gene therapy, where DNA, mRNA, siRNA, or miRNA can be used as a therapy to help the body target cancer cells. Another treatment includes modifying time or tumor immune microenvironment. When tumors grow, they become increasingly difficult for the immune system to penetrate. Another treatment is adding CTLs, which is where T cells are taken from an individual and a chimeric antigen receptor is added so they can attack cancer cells. This is also known as CAR T treatment. There are also therapeutic vaccines, such as modified cancer cells that are taken and modified to present to the immune system and help the immune system fight the cancer. And lastly, there are artificial antigen presenting cells. Unknown to many, an allergy is actually an autoimmune disease and has very similar developing therapies as cancer, broadly speaking. With modern technology, there will hopefully be a time soon when things such as food allergies have a medical solution. With that, I will conclude. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something.